Welcome to episode 13 of Travelling Science. G'day legends, welcome back to Travelling Science, the podcast that's sharing science with the world. My name's Crowe and I'm the Travelling Scientist, coming to you today from Revelstoke in British Columbia, Canada. I'm a health science communicator, and on this podcast, we interview doctors, researchers and experts, hearing their stories and sharing their ideas that can help us to live smarter, happier and healthier lives. This week's guest is Zoe Catterall, part-time scientist and full-time musician. She's the lead singer and guitarist in a band called the Buoys, and when she's not making epic music, she works in a variety of scientific fields, including endocrinology, fertility, beer brewing, and even organ and tissue retrieval, where she essentially takes body parts from donors, which can go on to save other people's lives. And that's just what she does when she's not too busy being famous. During our discussion, Zoe answered questions like how tissue and organ donation works, why science is important for beer brewing, are there any dangerous chemicals in our beer, the importance of sleep and coffee for a hectic schedule, what it's like being a full-time musician and a part-time scientist, how science-minded people can embrace their creative side, and why you should probably start a band. And we also discussed things like working in a fertility clinic, creating and drinking sustainable beer, extracting eyeballs, touring in a band, pre-show rituals, science versus art, creativity and structure, and saving lives. And at the end of the episode, the boys have actually allowed me to play one of their best songs right here on the podcast. So definitely stick around to the end to hear true greatness. But before all of that, I'd just like to quickly share a review of the podcast with you. And this week's review comes from Low Key Fish, who didn't even write anything. He just left me a muscle arm emoji. And look, I can respect that. Thanks so much, Low Key Fish. You got a wicked YouTube channel that more people should check out. But if you're listening to this now and you enjoy Travelling Science, consider taking just a minute to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, because it helps other people to find the show and I truly appreciate it. Did you do it? Alright, then you're allowed to listen to the rest of the podcast and my fantabulous discussion with the one and only part-time scientist and full-time musician, Zoe Catterall. Zoe Catterall, welcome to Travelling Science.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm chuffed.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for coming on the show. Just to get started, would you like to tell people what exactly did you study at university?
Yeah, so I did a Bachelor of Biomedical Science at UTS.
Cool. Any specific subjects?
Lots of biochemistry. I ended up, so this was a really good one where you could kind of tailor it to what you want to do. And to translate that into Zoe's mind, it was, okay, tailor this degree to the things that you like. So I did a lot of immunology, microbiology. I did some anatomical pathology, love AP, which is a wild thing to say. It was a stressful course, that one. But lots of medical sciences.
Yeah. And did you go into that sort of planning to, I don't know, I did a lot of similar subjects and a lot of people always ask me, oh, you're going to be a doctor? And that was never my intention. I don't know if that's something you ever considered, or were you just kind of studying and thinking you'll figure it out later?
It was my plan. And I ended up sitting the GAMSAT and passing. And I thought, okay, like, yeah, sure, I'll do the thing. But then at that time I started my band instead. I knew that, like, looking into the future, looking back, like, the music industry and being a musician as a whole is quite tiring. And I don't know, I felt like I wanted to do that when I was young, and maybe I could approach medicine later in life if I still wanted to do it.
Yeah, wow. So you were sort of thinking, this is it. I could be a doctor, or I could go be a rock star. That's a tricky decision.
It actually is. It sounds like it's an easy decision, but it's, yeah, I just had my dream of being a doctor. But the more it's because I started working in the health sector before studying for the GAMSAT. And I think just the more people I spoke with, I just realized that it just wasn't for me at that time. You know, it requires a lot of time and energy, as does being in a band. Like, it's not fun and games all the time. It's hard work. But I knew that I could only give everything to one of those things. Some people can do both. There's so many people who do both. Some incredible musicians out there who are doctors, surgeons. But yeah, I have a certain number of spoons in a day.
I've never heard that saying before. I love that.
Oh, the spoon analogy, it's great.
So what was the first job you got when you came out of university? You said you sort of worked in the medical sector. What were you doing there?
So I ended up chatting with someone who was a scientific officer for New South Wales Health Pathology. And I decided that that was the angle I was going to take because I came out of uni, started my band, and I needed a job that was, stable, reliable, but still piqued my interest. So I started in specimen reception, which is essentially the lab responsible for making sure everything gets to the right place. It's a very common first foot in the door, but I was probably there for 3 months before I moved to a biochem lab.
You did that for a while, and then you got into what did you do after that?
Well, so because I had gone straight from high school to uni to full-time work, and I was like, gosh, I need to travel. So I quit my job to travel, and I was like, I'll just come back to it after I've gotten this out of my system.
I asked Zoe a bit later where she went travelling, and she said this. So many countries: England, Germany, Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, and Ireland. It was one of those border one-way ticket and see how long I can last trips. I actually did the same thing after university, hitting some very similar countries, and like Zoe, I also came back and struggled to find a job in my field of science. Like, as an immunologist who did research in vaccine development, I still couldn't get a job during the pandemic. How ridiculous is that? Anyway, Zoe ended up finding a very unique job.
But when I came back from Europe, there were no jobs in biochem, which was the only place I had experience. And I saw this job description of a tissue retrieval technician. And I looked further, and they were looking for people who had experience with, anatomy and physiology. They were some of my best subjects at uni, so that was a good, strong point going in for that job interview that I had no experience for. So I ended up getting that job as a tissue retrieval technician, and our job is to remove human tissue from organ donors for donation. So a surgeon will remove whole organs. They need to be removed so precisely. But any tissue like eyes, bones, tendons, and skin can be removed by a trained technician or scientist.
Right, so you weren't actually dealing with, say, the kidneys or the livers. You were more dealing with things like skin. What else?
Skin, eyes, bones, and tendons.
Wow, that's full on. How did you feel going into that job? I don't think I could do a job like that. That sounds intense.
I think they did a marvelous job at, in the interview process, because all the people who ended up in that job just seemed to have the knack. There's a real level of professionalism in that team whereby there's a deep understanding of how, important or sacred or taboo or whatever word you want to use there is around death. And you have to be pretty good at compartmentalizing. And it's kind of like you just rock up and you're like, well, it's my job. Someone's got to do it. And the importance and the power of helping someone fulfill their last wish was something that made it really easy to be able to, deal with that kind of death every day.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. Just fulfilling people's wishes, and in another way, you're saving lives. That those tissue donations from one life will go on to save another. So I guess even though you didn't become a doctor, you've still contributed to saving lives in many ways.
Yeah, and like in really close ways sometimes too. Like so, myself and my team, we were the first in New South Wales to collect skin. And I actually have a family member who was in a serious accident and had severe burns and who received grafts that I had collected.
Wow. So you knew the person that was taking the donation?
Yeah.
Whoa, there you go. That's very cool. So how does one become an organ donor? Like, I just assumed that I was. I found out yesterday that I wasn't. I now am, but what is the process like?
Yeah, it used to be on our license, right? So when you go for your L's or your P's or whatever, you could tick whether you wanted to be an organ donor, but that's not a thing anymore. So you can go on Donate Life health.gov.au and register yes or no there.
If you live in Australia, check that website out. The link is in the show notes. And if you live in North America or wherever you are in the world, there will be a similar governmental website that you can use to sign up to be an organ donor, which is an incredible zero-cost thing that anybody can do. But it's super quick. It takes like a minute, and you could potentially be saving multiple lives in the future. So I think it's really good to sign up for.
It's so valuable. And it's just as valuable to register a no, because the amount of time that goes into assessing a donor, sometimes you can spend hours on a case preparing only to find out that they actually had registered no, but not through the official means. So say it was on their license, which is not, viable these days. But so because it is so quick and easy to sign up, but the real work is talking to your family and friends, but especially your next of kin, because even if you register a yes, they can override that and say no. But if you register a no, your next of kin can't override that. So it helps everyone just to be able to have a quick frame of reference of your wants post-mortem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to go out there and share your intentions. It's an awkward conversation to have, but it's one of those conversations that we need to have.
It's surprisingly easy to have, right? Like the way that it can just come up is, you can talk about how amazing it is that one set of eyes can restore the eyesight of up to 4 people. And then you can be like, hey, mum and dad, like, by the way, I really want to be an organ donor and that's really important to me.
Simple as that. I love that. It sounds weird, but how might you go about convincing someone, maybe someone who's never thought about it, or maybe someone who's against the idea? Is there anything you might say to somebody to convince them that maybe organ donation or tissue donation is a good thing to do?
I mean, having worked with the incredible people that are still in that field now, like the first thing that comes to my mind is just, my gosh, you're in really good hands. The respect and love that goes into that work is incredible, including like the ongoing communication with the family of the donor as well. I think they do a really incredible job.
Yeah, so it's certainly appreciated if someone does donate organs or tissue, their body and their person is appreciated to a great extent because they're doing such a great thing.
Yeah, very much. That's right.
Incredible. Well, that's awesome that you did do that, and you're not doing that anymore.
No, I had a big stepping stone. I ended up, because at the time, working in organ donation, of course, you can't choose when you work, right? You're kind of on all the time. So we were on call quite a lot, and there's a lot of shift work involved. And so, I was the least favorite party member who would always be like, oh, I'm away for the next 5 weekends because I'm on tour. The band that I'd started, I had never ever planned for it to even be a band that we would go on tour. I just thought, we'll play in a couple of pubs, that'll be it. So when we started touring, I had to look for a new job. And so that's when I moved into an endocrinology lab. And this was back with pathology for a fertility clinic.
Endocrinology is the study of your hormones, those little chemicals that flow around your body and make you feel things like love and arousal, but also stress and anxiety. And they play a huge role in fertility, which is the science of making babies. But what was Zoe actually doing at this job?
So we're in the endocrinology lab, we're responsible for measuring the hormones in patients receiving fertility treatment, and then also any patients who have any concerns in early pregnancy. And we're mostly looking at the sex hormones, HCG, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, FSH, all of the way that those will all move up and down in a monthly cycle give us a really good indication of when and if a patient is ovulating. And then depending on what that patient needs, whether they need a manual extraction of those eggs or whether they just maybe needed their cycle to be monitored and regulated before then actually being able to go have intercourse with their partner. So it was basically our job just to run the blood tests and keep an eye on how the ovulation was going.
Right. And the ultimate goal there was to promote pregnancies in specific couples, is that right?
Yeah.
Very cool. You've done some incredible sciencey jobs, and there is another one we'll be speaking about soon. But let me talk a little bit about the band that has been threaded throughout this amazing science career. You mentioned a couple of times you started around the time you were finishing university. So tell me exactly how it did start. Where did the decision come from to start making music?
So I had so many musical friends where I grew up in Cronulla, and I always wanted to be in a band, but I knew I couldn't do it while I was at uni because I'd get too distracted. And I just found it really difficult to find a band that I could join. I just kept kind of getting ums and ahs as responses. And I mean, there were no, as I would have said back then, no chicks on stage. But they were like, yeah. And so my friend posted a status saying, there aren't enough women playing music in Cronulla. And I sent him a message. I was like, yeah, no shit. I was like, but I had been trying to corner my friends to start a band with me, but like me, there was a lot of trepidation in it all because there weren't a lot of women on stage. It was really, really daunting. So he actually set me up on a blind date of sorts with his cousins, and I rocked up to their house having never met them, and we jammed. I showed them all the songs that I'd been writing, and we did a couple covers, and then 2 weeks later we played our first show. Straight in the deep end. And that was with the only other woman, who was playing in Cronulla at the time. And she was referred to at that time as stay-at-home mum, but she's now Ruby Fields, taking over the world, Ruby Fields.
I didn't actually know who Ruby Fields is, but I had a quick look and she's awesome. Her number one song on Spotify is called Dinosaurs, and it actually made me cry, which I wasn't expecting. So yeah, very talented musician. Check out Ruby Fields.
So she's a Cronulla gal. Yeah.
Wow, there you go. And so just to clarify, the Buoys is an all-girl band. It's Buoys spelt Buoys. Is that a play on words or?
It is a double entendre, yeah.
And I actually just recently found, I don't even know if you probably know about this, on your YouTube channel, the description is: combine a fizzled out Tinder date, a Gumtree ad, and a million mutual friends, and you get the Buoys. Inspired by workplace feuds, people who walk slowly in front of you, and a ton of bad dates. Where did that come from? I love that. That's such a good amalgamation of things.
That's very much like the epitome of like OG Boys, like, because I feel like I wrote that bio, oh my gosh, so many years ago now. I met our drummer Tess through a Tinder date. And, I was like, I really need a drummer for my band. I want to like get it back up and running. And they were like, oh, my cousin like used to drum in primary school.
Wonder if she's any good.
Yeah. And well, the serendipity was amazing because so this is Tess we're talking about, and she had just moved back up to Sydney and decided a week or two before I texted her that she was going to start drumming again. So she was drumming at home and we met up for coffee. Then I find out she's also a scientist. So yeah, we then ended up accidentally spending probably up to an hour talking about what we do in science before we were like, oh wait, yeah. And I was like, do you want to join my band? And so, yeah, the rest is history. We met our old guitarist from a Gumtree ad. I just put an ad up on Gumtree and she, responded, but she's moved on to greener pastures. It's hard being in a band with so many amazing women. We're all really similar in that our careers outside of music and our lives are so rich and so full that it is pretty hard to do both. And so since then, we've met Hilary Geddes through a mutual friend. She's a jazz whiz and rock whiz. My gosh, I mean, I've never seen anyone play guitar like Hilary. And then we also met Courtney through a mutual friend who, on her first gig with us, she hadn't even rehearsed. She just knew all of our songs from Spotify, rocked up, and we played together. And I hounded her every week after that to join the band. I really laid it down. It's like, be our friend, join our band.
So some of your songs include Lie to Me Again, I Want You, Bad Habit, Red Flags, and I just discovered all of the video clips on YouTube as well. You girls make some incredible music. So what's the most recent one you've come out with?
So the most recent one we did was I Want You, which was so fun to record. It just like fell together so beautifully. Oh, it's huge.
There is a lot of energy in that song, and the video clip is hilarious. That's the one where you're in a giant backpack, right?
Yes, and we are little mini boys in a giant backpack being carted around Sydney.
It's so good. Check out the video on the Buoys YouTube channel. It's genius.
Watch us be silly. And we edited out the bits where we injured ourselves because we're jumping around on a spring mattress. The floor of the backpack was like a spring mattress, and we kept like falling onto the drum kit. It was
I was wondering, how did you film that? It looked like you were in a giant bouncy castle or something.
it was a bouncy castle in a studio.
Genius. And then, what is that song? There's another one where you're all playing dodgeball. Is it Bad Habits or?
Ah, yes, that's Bad Habit. Yeah, sport aficionados.
Well, the music that you all make is truly incredible. It's inspiring, and it just goes to show that, for the most part, science-minded people can also be incredible and creative and awesome up on stage. I wonder if you have any advice for any science-minded people out there who don't think that they're creative or don't think they could do something like that.
Oh gosh, you have to start somewhere, right? And even if you don't think you're creative, like just give it a go because even just creating for yourself is one of the funnest things ever. And I think being a scientist, like if you're of a science mind, you're obsessed with problem solving and finding the answer, whether it's the answer you want or not. But that's songwriting too. Like you've got to do trial and error to figure out the melody that works the best. You've got to use maths to figure out how many beats to fit into a certain bar. Like, and if that's how your brain works, like use it to your strength for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I think some people are like, oh, I'm a scientist. I can't paint, I can't draw, can't play music, I just do science. But there's so much potential.
There's untapped potential for sure.
Even if it's just for yourself, just go ahead and do it. Get out of the textbooks and into whatever creative endeavors that you're passionate about or even just interested in. I mean, for me, it's video creation, planning, filming, and editing, stuff like this. But everybody's different, and maybe you haven't discovered it yet, or maybe you have, but you think you're bad at it. Keep playing with it, and you could end up famous one day. You never know.
And I think everyone has a bit of creativity in them, scientist or not. Like it's hard to spot sometimes in yourself, but there's always something there that maybe you just yourself don't recognize as creativity.
Totally. I definitely agree with that. Any big plans for the band? Any new music or any tours coming up?
So much coming up actually, because we just recently did a national tour with Ballpark Music, but we had to skip Adelaide, so we're revisiting, and so we're gonna get the band back together for Adelaide, and then that'll be in and around Sidefest, which is between Brisbane and Fremantle, with Bugs, Susie, Sly Withers, Tiger's Jaw, a really good lineup that one, which is a little mini festival, and then we're doing Spilt Milk at the end of the year, which will be awesome. Oh, and we just announced we're playing with DMAs in September.
I saw that. Great. Well, this is coming out at the start of September, so if you're thinking about going to see the Buoys or the DMAs or any of those bands that Zoe just mentioned, that's all coming up later this year, and it will be a great opportunity to see those legends live. I'll be trying my best to make at least one of those shows, if not multiple. So Sidefest actually already happened before this podcast was released. Soz. But you can still see the Buoys play with the DMAs in Melbourne, Torquay and Castlemaine toward the end of September in 2023. And Spilt Milk is a festival with a wicked lineup, including the Buoys, and that's happening all around Australia in November and December of 2023. All right, let's take it back to science for a minute, because I know you've got a new job that allows you to stay sciencey when you're not making music. So what are you currently doing for work?
Well, so because this, similar to before, like the band just kept growing past where I thought it would ever grow. And so it was time to find another job that was more suitable to my hectic touring schedule. And someone from Young Henry's reached out to me and said, like we need an extra set of hands in our lab. And we've heard that you need, a flexible job. Do you want to come work for us?
Was this through mutual friends again?
It was. So I used to play in this band called Dead Witch, And the drummer from Dead Witch, hooked me up. She's spread the word at Young Henry's and said, I've got this friend. She's a nerd. Like, she'll be really good if you ever need a hand in the lab. And it worked out so well. Like, they are so supportive and understanding of, the certain sacrifices you need to make when you're in a band. It means that like you can't always be available at the drop of a hat, or you're sometimes running off weeks of fumes and exhaustion. And they're so good. And it means I can still exercise my science brain because I don't think I could live without it.
No, yes, I feel the same. So you're working as a quality scientist at Young Henry's. What exactly do you do when you're there? What does a quality scientist do in a brewery?
We're essentially just testing all of the, important specs in a beer. Its alcohol content, how hazy it is. The first thing that we do in the life cycle of a beer is, so instead of using packaged yeast at Young Henry's, we keep our yeast on site in propagation tanks. So I'll do a cell count first thing in the morning, depending on what they're brewing. And it allows me to tell the brewers how much yeast to pitch into the beer rather than them having to guess. Because the yeast being a living organism, it has its good days and it has its bad days. And it just makes it way more precise and repeatable, which is music to any scientist's ears.
And for the brewers, consistency is key, right?
Massively key.
Like if they use the same amount of yeast every day, but the yeast is acting a little bit different every day, beer's not going to work out properly, right?
Yeah. And a big part of our job too, of course, is microbiology, just making sure there's no contamination from any wild yeast, because that is a big, annoying thing for a brewer to come upon. So essentially, like, we're like the helping hand to the brewers, making sure everything's running smoothly, can provide them with some nice graphs and data.
Awesome. I have heard that large amount of beer brewing is just making sure that everything's been cleaned and sanitized, which can be painful, but it's an important part of it, because otherwise you're going to get some bad microbes and make some really bad beer.
And the best thing about having a lab to be testing that, right? So, because we'll take a micro sample of every ferment, or after every bright beer has been, put into a new tank. If any growth occurs, and it's consistent with growth from the previous batch that was in that tank, we can say, well, the cleaning wasn't, as thorough.
Someone needs to be fired.
Well, and like the best thing about it is, because we're there to be able to show that track record, it means that every brewer and anyone on the floor knows just how much it takes to keep everything actually really clean. And it's true, like, my goodness, it's a lot of work to keep everything clean.
I can imagine. Now, I'm not sure if you work in this area specifically, but can you tell me anything about the sustainability projects they've got going at Young Henry's? Because I know that they do a lot. They're very ethical about making their beer, right?
Yeah. So I'm not directly involved with this project. It's run by UTS. Yay. I'm an alumni, but so one of the biggest like byproducts of fermentation is carbon dioxide.
I think the reaction is water and sugar get converted by yeast into carbon dioxide and alcohol, right?
Water, sugar, yeast, yeah, into alcohol. There are plenty of other byproducts, but they usually will get reabsorbed by the yeast or reused in the, like, you get a lot of flavor acids that come out of the fermentation process. But the big one, carbon dioxide, has to be expelled, and breweries produce a lot of it. So what Young Henry's are doing is they're using microalgae to absorb that carbon dioxide production. And they've also entered a new trial of feeding that microalgae to cattle to try and reduce the methane in their poo-poo. I can't think of a better word than poo-poo.
Cool. So the potential is that they're reducing carbon emissions from brewing beer by using algae, which converts that carbon dioxide into oxygen, and then also potentially feeding that algae to cattle, which would reduce their methane emissions, methane being much worse than carbon dioxide as well. So it sounds awesome, and if it does work, I'd like to see more breweries adopting these strategies.
Yeah, I wish I knew how many people were involved, because it's so effective. And look, I'm not directly involved in it. Everyone else has to do so much hard work to keep it up and running. But from the outside looking in, it seems like, a bit of work for an amazing outcome.
If you want to learn more about sustainable beer brewing, listen to last week's episode with Dr. Alex Thompson, who is working with UTS and Young Henry's using algae to capture the carbon emissions during beer production. Super interesting episode. Feel free to check it out if you haven't already. Working in a brewery, do you get free beer? It sounds like a dream job.
It is a bit of a dream job. We do. We're very lucky.
Ooh, do you have a favourite one? Like, what's your favourite Young Henry's beer?
I really like, well, so because normally when I have a beer, it's at the end of a really long day after work because like we'll have work drinks every now and then. And so I always find myself having a stayer because after a long day of work, I'm too tired to drink anything full strength. But I really love our motorcycle oil. It's like a dark hoppy lager. Yeah, a dark hoppy ale, sorry. Hoppy porter. The brewers will be laughing at me for saying a hoppy ale. It's a hoppy porter, Zoe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a stout or a porter or something. I'm super basic. I just love the Newtowner Pale. Classic.
Oh yeah, like look, I'm not a brewer at all, like it's as you know, like my work experience is in health and human biosciences. So it's really, really cool to come in and just provide, my science brain in a quality sense and learn as much as I can because these brewers are just, oh, geniuses. They know everything. It's incredible.
I can imagine. And I'd love to speak with a zoologist or a brewer on the show one day. So if you're listening, if any of the Young Henry's crew wants to come on, I'd love to speak a bit more about the science of beer brewing.
Yeah. Oh, I've already got names rattling off in my head of who would be perfect to speak to you.
Just a couple more questions about yourself, Zoe. Do you have any daily rituals that you swear by?
Oh, that's a good question. Not really. I mean, the hardest thing about being a musician is that everything is so out of order all the time. But we have our rituals when we're touring for sure. It's like usually the first flight in the morning, we go into the lounge, we get a coffee. I fall asleep on the plane, which means I'm very well rested by the time we land. So I'm always the one who drives us out of the airport. We see if we can get early check-in. We go scout a cafe, we hang out, then we nap, then we sound check. And it's consistent every time, like clockwork.
I love how it's like we get coffee and then we get the flight and then we get more coffee.
Yeah, lots of coffee when you're touring.
Yeah, I can imagine. I love those band rituals. I think it's good wherever you are to get together as a group and do these things that ground you and get you ready to play a wicked show.
Oh, always. I mean, gosh, the songs that we sing before we go on stage too are very that's a very pre-show ritual. Like we're so lame. And people think that like backstage bands are always up to naughty stuff, but we're literally just back there. Tess and I will make sure we've had our Voltaren. We all stretch. I do my vocal warm-ups. We stand in a circle and we put our hands at, like when you put your hands in the circle and you go up and down and we'll go, boys, 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 boys. We like to pretend that we're like sort of a footy team.
I love that. I was actually going to ask if you do that. And I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Of course they don't do that.
We so do. Yeah, we're corny.
Epic. I love that. Is there anybody that really inspires you?
Oh my gosh, so many. Cecil and Sophie from Body Type. I mean, all the girls from Body Type. I'm just like, they're half the reason I got into this. I remember watching them live the first few times, just thinking like, oh, well, okay, maybe I can do it. They inspired me from day dot.
Shout out to Body Type, another wicked band out of Sydney. Definitely worth checking out.
I'm a big fan of ye old Dr. Taylor Swift. I think her storytelling ability and the way that she composes music and lyrics is just genius. I take a lot from that. And then just, my family, I think like just we've got a really hectic and beautiful matriarchy in our family. And I'll often write songs with them in mind, especially now that all the young ones are starting to have kids. There's always little cute, like early young life around, which then reminds me of when I was that age. And yeah, I think like, the observation of life is the most inspiring.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, shout out to Zoe's family. You have raised an incredible human being. Can I ask you what's next? Do you think you'll get more into brewing or full-time Rockstar? Maybe back to biomedical sciences? What are your thoughts for the near future?
Well, the boys are going to be recording our debut album this year.
Wow.
So we'll start to get the ball rolling on that one this year and it'll come out next year, which is so exciting. So I think that'll be the determining factor on whether I cut back on some science or not. But I don't know if I could ever fully cut out science. I think I really enjoy just being able to flex that part of my brain. But I do see a lot of touring in my future and hopefully a really good album.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Do we know what it's called yet, or is that still a secret?
Well, we don't. We don't know. We always do those things so last minute. Like to work backwards because when I write, it's just so observational that there's not necessarily always a theme. So it's nice to kind of figure that out or create a theme that from an experience that we had during recording or yeah.
Lovely. Well, I'm sorry to keep saying this, but make sure that you're following the Buoys Band, that's Buoys, on Spotify and Instagram, and keep an eye out for that debut album.
Very exciting.
Zoe, I've got some listener questions for you here, if you've got a moment to answer a few of those.
Yeah, for sure.
But before that, every week here on Travelling Science, we make a donation to a charity of the guest choosing. And this week, Zoe simply asked that I sign up to donatelife.gov, which means that if I pass away anytime soon, my organs and tissue can be used and donated to help other people and potentially save their lives. It costs me nothing, it takes about 2 minutes, and it's a great thing to do. So thanks to Zoe, I've signed up to donate my body if anything should ever happen, which hopefully it doesn't. But I've signed up, and you certainly can sign up too. If you're in Australia, go to donatelife.gov. And if you're anywhere else in the world, you can sign up to be an organ donor as well. Just Google it and sign up today. And normally on this podcast, we make monetary donations to different charities, and that money comes out of my own pocket. So if you'd like to support this show and the charities that we donate to every single week, you can certainly do that too. All of the links required are in the description just down below. But now, let's get back to travelling science. The first one is actually very relevant. Maggie G wants to know if you can think of any situations in which science has helped your music career, or perhaps how music has influenced your science career.
The way that, more in like a logistical sense, music has defined my science career because I've had to adapt and change what role I've been in or what job I've been doing based on how busy the band is. And there are so many songs that I've written about my experiences at work, like more than people know. But yeah, in terms of how it influences, especially now working for Young Henrys, one of my old UTS lecturers invited me to Splendour this year.
Splendour is short for Splendour in the Grass, which is a huge music festival that happens every year in Byron Bay, Australia. And at this festival, they have a science tent, which is where I first met Zoe Catterall. And when I say met, I meant I saw her on stage and awkwardly stalked her Instagram and asked if she wanted to come on the podcast. But yes, Splendour, wicked festival with good music and good science.
To do a talk, and I think she knew that I was working at Young Henrys and then remembered me as a student, and that came about from being at Young Henrys as a scientist there, which then meant that I was at Splendour for a completely different reason, and it was so cool talking to other scientists and not being there as just a muso. So that one was really activating both sides of the brain the whole weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting how those two seemingly different worlds can overlap in a lot of really interesting ways. I went to Splendour like 25% just for the science tent. And everyone who I've told that to is like, there's a science tent? And I'm like, yeah, Wendy Zuckerman was there, Dr. Carr was there, and Naomi Kobelik, and I met so many incredible people such as yourself. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
I hadn't actually ever been to the science tent before, and now I will never go back to Splendour the same again because I spent so much time there and learnt so much and met some incredible people. It was so good.
Lovely. Next question. Samson and I wanted to know, because you can collect tissue from donors, does that mean that in certain rare circumstances you might be able to do basic surgery on a live person? Or is that crazy?
Oh, goodness, no.
No? Very different situation?
Yeah, so different. Because, when we're collecting tissues from an organ donor, we are not at all worried about them, for example, losing too much blood or having blood pressure issues due to anesthesia. And there's so much to take into account with a living human. Not to say that I wouldn't ever exclude that I might train myself in that one day, but we'll see.
Cool. And my good friend Yorkie56 was wondering, are there any chemicals used to speed up the fermentation process? Do you know about anything like that?
Not that I know of. I mean, not being a brewer, I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I feel like I would know if because there would be usually things that we would have to test their levels for. So no, not that I know that we use. Yeah, there's too many regulations. Perhaps other brewers do.
Yeah, I think some of the bigger breweries, like mainstream beers, the really cheap basic beers you can get anywhere, apparently they use some chemicals that speed up the process that may or may not be healthy. But it could just be a conspiracy theory. I don't want to start any rumors here.
Yes, not that I know of.
Well, thank you for answering those listener questions, Zoe. And just to finish it off today, we've got a lightning round for you. Quick answers, 6 questions, 60 seconds. You ready?
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right, here we go. Would you donate an organ to a friend while you were still alive?
No, I've got some autoimmune conditions. I don't think I'm eligible.
Oh, it sounds like a convenient excuse if you ask me.
I need my kidneys.
Fair enough. If you'd never studied science and you never played music, what do you think you might be doing today?
Maybe law? Although I found out recently I really like accounting, which is super weird, and please don't judge me. Maybe accounting.
Law or accounting? Something in a desk, maybe. Cool. What do you love most about being in a band?
Do I have to choose one? My bandmates. If I had to just choose one, my bandmates. Having them by my side as friends, yeah. Or sisters, yeah.
Good crew? Lovely. What do you hate most about being in a band?
Lack of sleep.
Oh, yeah, sleep's important. If you had $1 million to put toward some sort of scientific funding, where would you like to see that money invested?
Well, at the moment, I'd say probably climate.
Awesome. And last question, what's your favorite organ or tissue that you used to deal with in your old job?
I guess my favorite to deal with would probably be the eyes, just because it's, I guess, fascinating and so precise. And it's quicker than everything else. All the other tissues require scrubbing in, like a more extensive scrubbing in. So the time and the prep and the length of the session is so long, but you can remove a set of eyes in like 10, 15 minutes.
Wow, there you go. Eyes, who knew? Well, Zoe, you've done so much. I could talk to you for hours about all the various different fields you've worked in, as well as being a member of an incredible band that makes awesome music. Definitely go and listen to the Buoys, and you're just doing great things. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us here today on Traveling Science. We truly appreciate it. And just to finish off, considering everything we've discussed here today, do you have any last bit of advice or wisdom, anything you'd like the listeners to take home, and maybe something that they can act on to improve their lives in some way?
Well, in terms of music, if you've ever thought about writing or starting a band, just do it. It's terrifying, but so worth it. But in terms of health and biosciences, I would say definitely register your preference, whether it's yes or no. Head on to that website because it's so quick and easy to do. And you could, potentially save so many lives.
So there you have it, legends. That was Zoe Catterall. What an absolute goddess. She's such a wicked person. She's the lead singer of the Buoys, which instantly makes her very cool. But she's also a power nerd, picking up odd science jobs in her spare time to exercise that curious part of her brain that we all have. And to top it off, she's super kind, super funny. It sounds like I'm being a wingman, like I'm talking her up or something. But hey, I am, because you're my friends and I'm telling you that Zoe is awesome and we should all strive to be a little bit more like her. Maybe we should all be more creative and maybe we should all start a band. I mean, even if you're a science nerd like me or you don't think you're creative in any way, just find something that you love and practice it, even if it's just for yourself. Maybe take some time to explore your artistic side, or at least consider it. And the other big thing that we covered today was the concept of becoming an organ donor. If you haven't done it yet or you're not sure, just take a moment to check and sign up, because it's such a noble thing to say that if anything ever happens to my body, I'm willing to share what I can to help those around me. I mean, that is true generosity, and it's tremendously appreciated by doctors, by nurses, by organ and tissue retrieval technicians like Zoe was. And it's mostly appreciated by the recipient, who could get another chance at life because of your donation. So wherever you are in the world, sign up to become a donor in your home country. And also tell people about it. Have a discussion with your friends and your family about your intentions to become an organ and tissue donor. And also share this episode with anybody who might be interested. Anyway, one last time, check out the Buoys on Spotify, Instagram, and Linktree. And I'm going to give you a taste of their music in just a second. But before that, make sure you subscribe to Traveling Science for more episodes every Science Sunday. Follow Traveling Science on Instagram so you can see the upcoming guests and maybe send in your own listener questions. And if you're more visually oriented, check out the Traveling Scientist YouTube channel. Finally, if you stick around to the end of the episode, I always leave you with a little secret. And this week's secret is that once upon a time, I was also offered a job as a beer scientist. Now, I really wanted this job, but I just booked a flight overseas to USA, which ended up turning into a 3-year adventure across North America. And it was incredible. I have no regrets. I did some incredible things in that time, but I always wondered what would have happened if I'd stayed in Australia and taken up a job as a beer scientist. Would I be some kind of incredible beer science genius now? Or would I just be like a full-blown alcoholic? I guess we'll never know. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, legends. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll catch you next Science Sunday. And to finish us out here, it's Zoe Catterall and the Buoys playing Lie to Me Again. Enjoy.
I wake and wonder where you are. It feels too far from me right now. You're next to me, but miles away. Was it too hard for you to stay? So you changed your mind.